Kyle is famous. I guess we'll see how this goes.
Kyle woke up. He is famous.
Well, I'm glad he woke up then.
Kyle is host of the most popular talk show in recent memory, Stay Up Late with Kyle.
I'd stay up late with Kyle.
Stay Up Late with Kyle has grown in popularity quickly in the last year, and the public has noticed. Inside has called Kyle a most excellent dumpy white man. Top Tech noted that Kyle is inspiring youth to explore STEM fields. Most other talk shows are dedicated to discussing Kyle and his personal details. Most online videos are best of clips taken from Kyle's latest broadcast. The eye of the world is upon Kyle. Tonight is Kyle's most important guest interview yet. Stay Up Late with Kyle will be featuring Rachel May. She is a kind and lovely philanthropist. She is dear to the hearts of many. This interview requires preparation. Kyle cracked his eyes open, knowing today is his last chance to prepare for the interview. Kyle has 30 hours left. He must choose his actions wisely.
Wither away. We're gonna exit the bed. Why did exiting the bed take an hour?
Kyle quickly crouched down on the floor, realizing his immediate need for... Kyle firmly pressed his ear into the carpet, hoping to hear some stray words from the neighbors below. I heard Rachel May is going on a trip out of the country soon. Oh, girlfriend, tell me more! Well, what I will tell you is that every night I don a mask that looks like a bug and fight misdoers. There was a stunned silence. Then a door opened, and someone exited the neighbor's apartment. Kyle wrote down his first question. Kyle wrote down his second question. Kyle wrote down his third question. Kyle wrote down his last question. Kyle ripped his page of notes out of the notebook and got up from the desk. Kyle grabbed the small key he kept in his desk. Kyle walked over to the strange door in the hallway, but found quickly that the door was locked from the inside. Kyle asked the store attendant whether or not they offered any free samples to important customers. The attendant gave Kyle a confused and slightly vacant look. Kyle began to beg for a free sample. Wanting Kyle to leave, the attendant grabbed a decrepit phone meant for spare parts and held it out. Kyle firmly clamped his mouth around the outstretched phone, creating several punctures in the screen. Kyle grunted and yanked with his head until the attendant let go of the phone. The phone is now Kyle's to use forever. Kyle hurried. Sitting across from his host chair was a glamorous woman with an air of genuinity. As Kyle approached her, Rachel looked up and smiled. Rachel's smile quickly turned to shock as she realized Kyle had not put on clothes that day. Kyle waved and smiled broadly. Rachel uncomfortably averted her eyes. Kyle started making his rounds around the room, greeting each crew member, none of whom looked at him directly. As it became apparent that Kyle had no intention of leaving, Rachel made some excuses and exited the set. One by one, the crew followed suit. Kyle was left all alone.
Kyle prepared by being a nudist. Let's try that again.
Kyle decided to take some time to choose the perfect outfit, knowing how important appearance is.
I kind of want to choose suit of armor.
Kyle was unsure of what exactly caused him to decide to wear his armor, but it felt like the right thing to do. After much squeezing and sweating, Kyle managed to wrap the metal suit around his dumpy self. Kyle wrote down his first question. Kyle wrote down his second question. Kyle wrote down his third question. Kyle wrote down his last question. Kyle ripped his page of notes out of the notebook and got up from the desk. Kyle grabbed the small key he kept in his desk. Kyle opened the fridge, intending to find something to eat.
Eat the fridge. Okay.
Kyle constructed a breakfast of poached eggs and toast, along with a small fruit cup and grilled sausage. Kyle ate his breakfast slowly and thoughtfully, enjoying every bite. He felt refreshed. Kyle wanted to access the pantry, but found it was locked with a small keyhole. The pantry door lock creaked as if it hadn't moved for years, but eventually opened. Instead of an assortment of canned goods and grains, Kyle's pantry stored his massive amount of bottled lard. Kyle. Sitting across from his host chair was a glamorous woman with an air of genuinity. As Kyle approached her, Rachel looked up and smiled. Good evening, Kyle, she said, looking him in the eyes. I've been looking forward to being here. Kyle responded.
Screen is spin in circles.
And I as well, Rachel, answered Kyle, extending his hand in greeting. You are a most welcome guest. After other mild exchanges of pleasantries, Kyle and Rachel were prompted to take their places for the broadcast. A moment after seating, the studio lights brightened and the cameras clicked on. Good evening, everyone, said Kyle, looking at the camera. Welcome back to Stay Up Late with Kyle. Tonight, I have the pleasure of interviewing the lovely Rachel May, who needs no more introduction. Kyle motioned to Rachel, who smiled and waved at the camera. Hello, Kyle, she said. I'm glad to be here. Well, I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss, so we might as well dive right in, said Kyle. I'm very ready, said Rachel with a winning smile. Kyle produced the notes he had taken earlier. Rachel, I and many others would love to know, are you a mother? Kyle looked up from his notes. Well, being a single woman with a career, she answered, that's not something that has crossed my mind. Rachel smiled genuinely at Kyle. Very reasonable indeed, said Kyle. He referenced his paper of questions. Kyle asked another question. We all have one. What's your guilty pleasure? Ooh, well, that's an easy answer, said Rachel. Dipping pickles in chocolate sauce.
What?
It might sound strange, but it's tangy and sweet at the same time. I eat it far too often. Rachel smiled sweetly. Kyle asked another question. You've been involved in a lot of different things, said Kyle. But what's your funniest story? Well, that's a great question, Kyle, said Rachel. I think the story I always remember is the first time I tried to make dinner for my family.
I remember that too.
In the soup I made, I swapped out the water with milk and tipped the whole jar of salt in the pot.
My dad would die.
While my family was sick from trying to eat it, I swiped their things and locked myself in my room. Rachel laughed elegantly. Kyle decided to move on. Kyle asked, Rachel, you managed to keep such a thin and healthy figure, said Kyle. What is your best diet tip? Well, a good diet starts with a plan, answered Rachel. And don't break it. Cheat days can turn into a habit.
Diets are bad for you.
But, she continued, that doesn't mean a midnight snack here and there isn't allowed. She smiled. Kyle looked at his flabby self, decided not to comment, and moved on. After reading his final question, Kyle looked up from his paper. Well, Rachel, he said, I think that's all I was planning on asking you. If that's the case, Kyle, may I ask you something in return? Asked Rachel, smiling one more time. Why exactly did you decide to wear a suit of armor today? Before Kyle could answer, the camera shut down. The broadcast was over. Kyle returned home knowing the interview had gone well. But as he lay in bed and drifted to sleep, he felt that perhaps something was still missing.
Shakespeare. Yeah. Oh no. There's a body on the floor. Why? Oh yes, that makes sense. There's a designated butter pocket. Oh, phew. Okay, apparently hitting random buttons is a good thing. Oh, goodness. You can always use more butter. I agree with that statement. My dad would not. Oh, I guess it could have been worse.